All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Benita Anderson, and we're going to spend an hour tonight. What I'm not here for is to recommend services or uh, uh, to do anything or recommend anything based on the symptoms and things that we're talking about. What I do want to do with you tonight, though, is share some research-based information for symptoms, things you can look for in your child, if for who may or may not be uh, struggling with anxiety and depression, or that's one thing, looking for symptoms. And also, we'll look at some management and prevention type things. Not guaranteed to prevent, obviously, but we'll look at management anyway. And then finally, I'll give you a slide. This slide is actually resources, and these are actually some resources that I use. Good evening. These are some resources that I used in preparing for tonight as well. So I feel confident that it's something you can use. So hopefully you will take those and use them. Okay. The first thing, we're going to break it into 3 sections. The first section is on anxiety in particular. We'll spend just a few minutes on anxiety specifically. And what we know about anxiety is, in one word, it can be summed up as what? It's fear, is what it is. So let's go for a minute. Let's just, we'll go real quick here. I won't waste too much or spend too much time on it. But can anyone think of a childhood fear that you had as a child, something that you were just fearful of?
The dark.
What was it?
Fear of the dark.
The dark, a fear of the dark. So mine was cats. Anyone else? Wherever.
Dentist.
Say it again.
Going to the dentist. Going to the dentist.
Going to the dentist. Anyone else? So if we take, can I get one more?
Fear of heights.
Heights. So you didn't get to ride the roller coasters, right?
Now I love them.
That's what I want to talk about. So if we take ourselves back to our childhood and look at those, they were childhood fears in some cases. And that's it. That's all they were, and that's it. We grow out of them. However, when it comes to anxiety, I want us to look at what turns a childhood fear, or when do we know with our children and with students. And I'll introduce myself at the end if we have time for that. But I'll tell you how you can find out who I am. But the anxiety comes in when the fear continues. So let's take a look at childhood fears versus something that should be defined as anxiety. The worry, nervousness, so much unease that it's about an event or something with an uncertain outcome. So when we take childhood fear and apply this definition to it, it's no longer childhood fear, correct? Now it's something that should be looked at. So our children, your children, I believe, are kindergarten through 6 or something like that. They're very, what are they? Clarify for me.
8th grade.
Kindergarten through 8. They're K through 8. So at some point we stop and say, is it just a childhood fear that's going to grow out of it? One of our participants just gave an example that he was afraid of roller coasters and afraid of heights. Now he's a roller coaster rider. Christopher, I believe it was. Now he's a roller coaster rider.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a childhood fear, right? And that's it. That's all it was. However, if the fear leads to worry, nervousness, unease every time the thought of this event comes up, or if we see our children or ourselves just being fearful of how an event is going to come out, everything. So we compare our definition, this definition of anxiety to childhood fear, and we go back, kind of mentioned just now, that's what the differences are. This is not being afraid of cats. This is, being afraid of cats is something that over time, they are not my favorite pet, but I don't, you know what I mean? Just like he said, you kind of grow out of it, of a fear. However, anxiety can be a little bit more serious. So I'm going to move forward. And I just talked about how they differ. So tell me about, can anyone else tell me about your experience now as far as the dentist? How do you feel? Who was the dentist person?
That was me. I'm okay with it now
Okay.
because I brushed my teeth and I flossed. So,
You know how
and
to
I don't
avoid
nearly
it.
use much candy.
So what she's saying, what's your name? I can't see you. Oh, it's Kate.
Kate, yes.
So thank you, Kate. What she's saying is she developed management or coping skills, would you say?
Yes.
So her coping skills, her management skills actually took her out of it. So that's one of the things that our children won't have right away, right? We're going to talk about how we can help them to gain those skills. But what we're dealing with right now is, what is it? So my question to you is it too early to expect them to manage? I don't know your children's ages, but just a question for you. Is it too early for you to expect that? And that's just something for you to ponder yourself. Should you expect them to be able to manage it at this point? And what the CDC, they give us a really clear explanation and they give us reasons and ways to think through this as parents, as teachers. They give us ways to look and when we see our children struggling, when we see them showing the symptoms that we're getting ready to look at. When we see them showing those symptoms, the CDC gives us some information that can help us decide. Is it time to look into something? I'm sorry. Is it time to look into something, or is it childhood? Is it something that's likely to go away? So let's take a look at what they're offering. The first thing they're showing us is the types of anxiety. Move you down. The first one is called separation anxiety. We know our children probably all experience it at some point, right? Would you agree? Just starting school, just starting daycare, they do experience it. But if you look at the terms, it says being very afraid when they're away from their parents, and it persists. The separation anxiety is so something that we're reflecting on. I'm not attempting to give answers. I want you to reflect on when is it okay, just something that they will grow out of as they become more comfortable with the people that they're being left with, whether it be school or childcare. So there are 4 types that we're going to look at, or 5. And the first one was just simple separation anxiety. They get nervous when they have to leave the people that they're comfortable with. The second one is phobias. And I use the cats, my cat example as something, having an extreme fear about a specific thing or a specific situation. As our children grow, and they start to manage their feelings, and their SEL skills get better as they get older. Sometimes they tend to get a little bit stronger in social emotional learning. I said SEL. In social emotional learning, meaning they become more self-aware. They're better able to manage themselves and manage their emotions. They learn how to respond to things. They learn how to make wise decisions. Some of these things will go away. However, look at the word extreme. If there's a fear to the point that they are not going near it, or they start to struggle with some of these things we're going to look at in a minute here, then it is something to be considered. Social anxiety, not just being afraid of being away from their parents, but just being at school, anywhere there are people, just being there. The CDC refers to that as social anxiety. Now, this is one that extends well beyond childhood. A lot of adults have to also seek, help with this. Just thinking about the future and about bad things happening. Our children, as we know, that's not something we want them to go through. But if we see that and we see that it's not getting better, then that's something that's, probably not necessarily something we want to let go on. Now, I need to share. I see we have some educators on here as well. So and I want to ask this perspective from school or anything that you've seen your children do in social situations and family situations. If they're feeling what we just saw, the fear, just living in fear, how do they respond? How do they react? Can we get some examples? What about people who work with them at school? What does a fearful child look like? What do they do?
Sometimes they cover their face, so they try to hide.
Okay. Physical, covering their physical appearance. Anything else?
They cry.
They cry.
Or I was going to say they have a change in their tone or voice level.
Voice level, the kind of screechy like. What else?
They avoid whatever's causing the anxiety.
Okay, trying to get away from it. What about their behavior? Can a child who's struggling with anxiety, can they be a behavior problem at school? Do you think? The fear? So everything we've said so far is self-protection, but sometimes can we agree that sometimes it could lead to lashing out as well? No?
Yes, misbehaving.
Yes.
Yes.
Misbehaving. The behaviors that we experience as educators with our kids, with our students, sometimes is a result of anxiety and fear. So I just kind of wanted to point that out and thank you all for sharing, because obviously you have the experience and you see what it looks like, but it's fear. And they don't know how to respond, and they're not at the age where they can self-manage and understand that this is anxiety. So that's what we do. Now, let's take a look at the physical impact. We talked about what happens, but I especially want parents to take a look at this. This is also in several research areas, you'll find that anyone who works with children is asked to look for these things. It's recommended that we pay attention. Are they suddenly not eating? Are they suddenly eating all the time? Stomach aches they happen for various reasons, as we know, just something that they ate. But we want to watch the persistence of it. Is it every day? Because at some point, anxiety becomes it affects the physical body of the child. Headache, stomach ache, and obviously we know when they're not eating, or if they're overeating or all they do is eat, then we want to consider anxiety as a possible cause. Now, when we talk about fear, if you look at the right side of the screen, when we talk about fear, these are some things we can expect to see as well. Now, obviously, this is extreme, right? But it's also realistic when the child is in panic mode. These things will happen to them. Okay, for now, we're going to leave anxiety for a moment and fear. And we're going to look at I call it the other side, but it's actually not another side. If you look, we are crossing the street, we're making a change, but notice that they also meet, right? Anxiety and depression. The person is standing in the middle of both. So we're going to move on to depression and take a look at some of the same things. What are the symptoms? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And we'll start with this one. Have you noticed the loss of interest in things that they loved? You know, have they put down a particular, I don't know, video game or a book or whatever their interest was? Have you noticed it just missing? Especially, you know, after the transition back to school. Hopelessness. That part of depression, of course, exists in adults too. Feeling hopeless about things that can be controlled. Now, clearly, you know, we can't control everything. But the CDC's definition says there's persistent sadness. When our students feel, or when we feel sad all the time, we feel hopeless about everything. That's a good time for us to take a look at what's going on. This was something that I intentionally quoted from the CDC. Okay, I just wanted you to take a look at that and read it through. I was giving you a few seconds to read that through. I'm sorry, this is someone that seems like they might be trying to get in. Okay. All right. So what are we observing with depression? Or if we think there might be a situation that needs to be looked at. The first one is sleep patterns. That's not unusual, but at the same time, if they're not sleeping, you just notice them not sleeping or sleeping all day. You know, if are there any changes? Here comes appetite again. That's always something to watch, and I'm sure you do. But we're just kind of creating an awareness or recreating or bringing ourselves back to an awareness of changes in appetite. And I mentioned anger. Earlier, because if we get to it, I'll tell you, a lot of my time as an educator was spent with kids a little bit older. I did have that work with that 7th and 8th grade group. And so when we see a lot of anger and we start to see fights, probably not there yet, but when you start to see those, that's also something that our counselors and things observe to see and try to bring the kid in and say, let's see what's going on. Because anger definitely is a part of it. Another thing we added to this one, to depression, is exhaustion. Just being tired all the time. We know that that's not common in our children. So when we see that, we want to take a look. The mood changes in the younger students, and this is based on research. It happens really quick. We obviously, as adults, we have them too, whether we're suffering from depression or not. But it happens. The change, their temperament changes really, really quick. Being irritable, being a little more cranky than usual. Also, not being able to concentrate is something we want to look at. I met with a teacher last night, and we were talking. She was telling me what was different after COVID, and she said one of the things I noticed is the students have a really hard time focusing. And so we were actually going through and working on a project together. And she said, this is what I noticed, is that they have a really hard time staying on task. These are the same students from, pre-COVID who did not have that issue. So again, it's something to look at. We all probably can agree that COVID did have an impact on our children's mental state. So it's just something to look at. And we spoke before, I mentioned before, the pain. Any pain that can't be explained and it's constantly, it keeps coming up. So those are some things we want to look at. And the third part of this presentation tonight, or the things we're talking about, is what can we do? We see what's happening. We see where the problems are. What can we do about it? And there are 4 main areas that as parents or anyone who cares for children that we can take a look at. Now, does this necessarily prevent anxiety and depression in the child? Of course, we can't say that. One can say that. But these are things that actually attribute to it. The first one being, what are they eating? Okay, I'm going to we're going to go through all 4 of these. And I'd like, after we go or while we're going along, I'm going to be asking you for some input. I'm interested in, as parents, what do you do? Do you have something you can suggest to the other parents on the line? The first one is the diet, which of course, in the younger children, I guess it could be a challenge. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. The 2 things that the body needs for calmness. So if we go to the anxiety definition, where there's constant fear, there's constant heart pounding, there's just constantly being scared of something. Magnesium and zinc are the 2 things that the research shows, and I see it several places as I go through these things in these workshops. Those are the 2 things that they need in their body, the 2 nutrients, to help kind of balance them out. So I'm going to show you an example of how some parents go about getting this done. Some of the things, I know it's probably going to be tough to get them to eat, but I'm sure you all are clever. You know your children and you know how to work these things in. But I do want to point out that for reducing anxiety, fruits, vegetables, and lean proteins are what's recommended. I'm sharing this with you because this is a mom. This is the work of a mom who is, she's an anesthesiologist, and I started paying attention to her during COVID because she was still having to go into work, but she had 2 children, I want to say around at that time, 4th and 6th maybe, or I don't know, 5th and 7th grade, somewhere in there. But she had 2 little boys. And so she happens to be a charcuterie queen. This is one of her hobbies. So she makes the food look interesting. So the children, her younger son, she talks about it, I've heard her before, and her younger son goes to school and everybody has to look at his lunch because she takes her artistic skills, her charcuterie, because that happens to be her. Like I said, it's a hobby for her. So I understand we're all not going to do that. But she explained to me one time, making the food look like something appealing to her son. It doesn't, at some point, it doesn't matter. He's eating carrots, he's eating celery. And if you look at this is a peanut butter and jelly salad. But the way that she does that is just one of the little tricks. And here's where we run into a problem is, of course, busy parents. We just have to get them fed, right? We have to make sure they eat. But these all, in essence, can induce anxiety in our children. Some of them are pretty straightforward, right? Quotas and stuff like that. With the processed meats, we like to do sandwiches sometimes. They're easy and with the processed meats are something to think about. If we see our children suffering, this may be something to think about. If we see them struggling with something, basically, when you look at that list, what's one word we can put on it? What's one word we can put on that all of that is high in what? It's sugar. So we know about the hyperactivity. We've known that for years, right? Automatically, our children we've been teaching that and learning that for years, that the sugar causes hyperactivity, but it also causes anxiety. All right, that was number one, nutrition. What can we do with that? What can we change if necessary? Or keep doing what we're doing. If you're doing it well, doing it right and doing it well, just keep doing what you're doing. But I'm creating an awareness that these are things that are causing some of our children problems. Now, the second thing on the list of what can we do, or what can we continue to do in our homes, is make sure there's physical activity. What do our children love to do now? What's their favorite activity at home?
Video games.
Video games.
Video games. And that's our culture. We're in it. And that's where we are. So the suggestion is, does anyone have a physical activity that you and your children participate in together? Anyone share something?
We ride our bikes in the summer when it's nice out.
Bike riding, they love it. Good one. Anything else you can think of?
Weather permitting, we take walks around the park.
Very good. Just walking together with the kids. These are all things that what it appears sometimes, and this is not to be judging, it's just what it appears is they get on the games, we're busy with what we have to do, and we just kind of we forget, we let it pass by us. So again, awareness. No, we got to get out of the house. And I'm just pointing out that this is another reason for it. Okay. The something that we might not have thought about is the anxiety that's coming out of the being still and how it affects depression. I pulled this picture because I thought it was interesting that the parents they probably really do push-ups. They actually exercise. So the more they see us do it, the more they see the parents do it, we know that they want to follow, they want to be like us, right? So if they're just having them around when we're exercising or doing something physical makes a difference. So that was the second option. Or the second thing to pay attention to is physical activity. How can you incorporate it? At one point, I was talking to a group and they talked about grocery shopping. They said they no longer allow their children to have devices when they're shopping. They have to go bring things to the cart. When they get home, they have to take them out and they have to put them away. So that particular mom was saying that's just a strategy she uses to cut down on some of the screen time. Mindfulness is a tricky one. I'm going to give you a lot of resources, but sometimes they just need to be calmed down. When they're going through an anxious period and you see them nervous, you see some of these physical symptoms in them. My stomach hurts, my head hurts. And, the doctor hasn't really been able to put their hand on it yet. It's calming them through mindfulness. Now, I do a training on mindfulness, but I do it with the adults. And it's to calm us down as educators and parents and anyone who works with children. We need it as well. But what it is just a series of breathing, for the most part, breathing exercises. And we do them sitting, but there are things that you can do with your children that involve breathing, stretching without having to be, up in an exercise place. You can actually do these in a chair. They can sit. You can sit and do them in a chair. And I want you to make a note of these resources. Counting. I have a friend who teaches fifth graders ballroom dancing. And when he and I interviewed about how ballroom dancing is able to help children with social emotional skills, he talked about the counting, and actually it was a question. The question for him was, how does ballroom dancing help with core learning skills? We talked about literacy and numbers, and he said the counting itself puts them in a state of mind of focus to have to, keep up with the counts all the time. And then the exercises that you'll see on these sites here are focusing exercises. Again, it keeps them, if you visit one of these, or I can't say there's one I like more than the other because they're all good. So if you get a chance to log on to them, you can see some mindfulness things for children. The third thing, is the fourth one actually, is sleep. How are they doing? What's happening? Do they have a bedtime that they know what it is? And are we enforcing it? The iPads, and I said school related, but what I meant is even if it is homework or whatever, is there a time that they have to go off? We talked about game consoles. Are they put away? I had a humorous conversation with a parent a little while back. She talked about her children know when she sleeps, so they will literally get up and get them back out. So, that's something for us to think about. Are they getting good sleep and or good continuous sleep, I should say. Rituals and routines when it comes to sleep. Do they know exactly it's coming? The time is coming, and I don't have there. This is not negotiable. And then what I was just mentioning, that mom mentioned to me, sleep checks. She has to go and check on her children because they're making decisions that, no, I don't want to go to sleep right now. So she has to do sleep checks. And this is the recommended hours, if that's possible. And then these are just some general things to think about. As far as what can we do? What if we're not really seeing a problem necessarily? But what are some things just to keep in mind as parents, just to try to keep our kids balanced, to try to prevent? These are just some suggestions, of course. A lot of things are uncovered during well visits. If you have a good primary care or a good pediatrician, doctor that you have a good relationship with, some things can be uncovered and taken care of, in advance. So that's a good starting point too. Hopefully having a good relationship with them. Routines, rituals and routines. Educators know when they have expectations, they're calmer. When they know what to expect, they know what's coming. When we have expectations and they know what they are, they tend to be more calm. Parents and teachers, all the adults working together, calm students when they don't see conflict or anything like that between the adults that care about them. I talked about the mindfulness strategies. That's the same thing. Stress management is the same thing. And again, you have the resources for that. Connection with the other families that these students are with. I saw something today with where the child was being basically, bullied, made fun of. And so connecting in those situations can sometimes solve that, believe it or not, if handled right. Just being able to connect with the other family, the other parents, and keeping communications open. And last but certainly not least, look for resources, find your resources, what's available. The CDC, if you go to the Center for Disease Control website, to the kids section, they will have tons of them. When I say resources, I mean places that you can go, things that you can use with your children right at home. There, you can steer your children to certain types of activities that have goal. They have a reason for going there. So even though it looks like coloring, it looks like, a drawing, there are resources online that they have more to offer than just the fun. Okay, so they are having fun, they are enjoying it, but at the same time, they're teaching stress management. Now, this is the slide that I was telling you about because I don't offer medical advice or anything like that, but all of these represent where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a research standpoint. And this is a part of my research, and I'm getting toward the end, so I'll go ahead and share. My dissertation is on social emotional learning for teachers and students. So I spent that entire time, 3.5 years, just learning about and writing about and having discussions and panel discussions and leading discussions on social emotional learning. And that is, as I said, becoming self-aware, being able to manage themselves, which is self-regulation. At the age of your children, it's basically about behavior, how you respond to things that happen to you that don't make you happy. Being able to make wise decisions, being able to make decisions that matter, being able to communicate with other people, to get along, and being willing to take a risk. So that's kind of where my research has been and where my interest was generated in this sort of thing. And this was prior to COVID. So during COVID, I was doing work going into schools, training teachers, doing professional development for teachers. That's what I was doing before COVID. When schools shut down, that's when I locked into the research on, because I was continuing to work on my dissertation anyway. So I locked into more research about this, and I especially went into mindfulness training. One of my favorite things to do is to practice mindfulness and breathing exercises with the adults, the teacher. We practice stretching and things just that calm our minds. And so when the teachers get a chance to see, the adults get a chance to see what they feel, then they're more willing, or they have a better idea of how it impacts students. When students come in from recess or at home, when they come in from playing and they're kind of hyped, or come in from, I don't know, anything that would have them hyper, and you need them to transition to a calmer state. The exercises, the mindfulness exercises that I talked about, that's what can achieve this for you. Okay. So are there questions? Anything you want to talk about? What about a share? Any light bulb, anything that came up that you want to share with the group?
I would just like to say thank you for that reminder about the diet, because sometimes we look to like chocolate or whatever as like, oh, comfort food. Not that you want to teach your kid that, but you don't realize that. I don't always realize you're putting more junk and problematic things into you, and that kind of exacerbates the problem. So thank you for that reminder.
You're welcome. What else? Any light bulbs? Anything you want to add to the discussion? Anything that came up that you reminded you of something that you do? Do you have a strategy that you want to add that you would like to share with the group? With the food and everything, you saw the French fry, it said fried foods, but we know as parents, sometimes it is what it is. If we're trying to get the child to an activity, there's something going on, we have to get somewhere after school, that drive-through is going to happen. But the thing that maybe we can focus on is the frequency. You know, if it happens on Monday, maybe we pack some things up in the car, some, you know, carrots and cheese and or something, a little less damaging to them, you know, and pack it up in the car and say, okay, we have an activity after school, or we have to go, you know, they have to go somewhere with me. So maybe have something in the car to get them through to dinner. Because a lot of those things, it can't look impossible. It can look overwhelming, you know, not to have, you know, allow them to have that. And of course they want it, they desire it. So when she mentioned chocolate, and that's us, that's the adult, that's our savior. But thank you, Amy, for validating me. You know, the same thing for us, moderation. So it's the same thing for them. We are not necessarily trying to stress ourselves out further by never eating chocolate, but it's the same thing for the children and the adults. It works the same way. Anything else? Anyone want to add anything? Any questions?
Dr. Anderson, I'm not sure if you can see, I only say this because I worked in a school and the teachers would always say to me, when they're in presentation mode, they couldn't see the chat box. Can you see the chat box as it's going? Okay.
Thinking about that.
Okay, just because all right, there are questions in the chat box. I'm not the moderator. It's
No, I need you,
remote
Amy. I
learning
need
that-
you. I'm right here.
The teachers always told me in class, tell me, Amy, if the kids are asking questions because I'm in presentation mode. So, okay, thank you for being receptive.
Thank you so
You're welcome.
much.
You're welcome.
Someone gave that. Listen, I'm going to go back real quick. I'm going to answer the questions, or we're going to talk about or look at. I'm assuming the parent dying was the answer of the fear, right? Well, the fear, is that what that was? Someone said they put in the chat. Thank you guys, because I did ask you to put it in the chat. And thank you, Amy. I would have been disappointed if I finished this and didn't take a look at it. Marlisa put in the basement was her fear, going to the basement. That's an interesting one. She said that would have been the answer to what do they do when they're scared or when they're nervous. Rosie said they fidget with their hands. And she also said they fight. And that was one that extends into as they get older, fighting with their peers when they're and Rosie answered carbs. What is that the answer to, Rosie? You put in carbs. Is Rosie he's still here? She put in carbs. Oh, sugars. Okay. When I asked the question, thank you. When I put in the question, what do all of those things have in common that were on the naughty list? And she said carbs. Okay. Thank you, Rosie. I got you. All right. I'm going back up. Kathy talks about yoga. Thank you, Kathy. Do your children do yoga, Kathy? Oh, Katie, I'm sorry. It's
Yep.
Katie.
It's okay. Yeah, no, they do. They do Cosmic Kids, which also has mindfulness things, and it helps when things are getting too ramped up. But I actually had a question for you about if you have tips or resources in terms of helping them regulate when, as you said, things are not going the way that they want to. Because in some cases, one of them may, one thing goes wrong and then it's just a force multiplier effect where anything that may have been bothering them comes out in this one incident. And so they just have trouble regulating. And so we're trying to find tools to help with that regulation. And so I'm curious whether you have any recommendations for those kinds of tools in those moments of strife that we can start putting into place.
So there are things on the CDC website, on all sites when you Google, you will see strategies, but I'm going to say, when I was in the school system, those were taught by the counselor. And what they did was the counselor was with them, they had regularly scheduled meetings, so they were able to reinforce it. So the question becomes the question, yes, the strategies are there. They're on there, you can Google them and they will come up. But the question becomes, are you able to be persistent and regularly do it? Because that's what they're going to need, right? If we can teach it all day. But as far as, let's say, I think what you're saying is an event happens, a stressful event happens. Can they implement it, execute it at that moment? And for the younger children, maybe not sometimes, right? Would you agree? Maybe at that moment they're not able to, but the more persistent, the more they've seen this. Some of the therapists say they see younger children, they practice these things consistently. That's what their meetings are.
Right.
So I asked, what is a meeting? What is a therapy session with a young child look like? And they say we over and over again till it becomes so ingrained in them that they use them when they need to use them. And so I think that may be what you're saying. How do you know, how does it get in there and stay in there to the point that you will use them when you need them versus just knowing about the strategy?
Exactly. Yeah, no, getting it ingrained so that it's part of their toolkit. You know, that's, I think, what we want to provide them, our toolkit, so that they can manage those big feelings and frustrations and things like that.
Right. I think that's what, as I said, I think that's what the therapists do, is that they just stress it. You know, it's like one of the school counselors was telling me, it's like a class. And it's like if you're teaching something, you're teaching a concept, you reinforce it. And that's what I do with my clients. I reinforce until they get there. So I thought that was a pretty good something that, you know, I wouldn't think about, not being in that profession per se, that whenever you teach, you're not just responding to questions. You're doing that. My son turns on YouTube Salamander Yoga and leads me from doing his own yoga in school. Awesome. I'm going to tell you, I stay away from using the Y word, because in my work that I do with public schools and all that, different schools, there's a kind of a misconception about it out there. It can be. But I definitely am one. I practice as often as I can. I will practice at home. I will go to sessions. I definitely see, I know when I haven't been with what we're talking about, social, emotional health, mental health. I know when I haven't been, and I know when it does calm me. So thank you all for being the ones to bring it up. I just refer to it as mindfulness, but yes, those movements, inverse movements, if you are practicing, you practice, anytime you're inverting your body like that, is rebalancing. And they love it, actually. A lot of schools are, they're bringing it into schools. So thank you, Amy, for bringing that to us, because they are using it and it is working because they like it. I was saying during COVID, I went back, and that was one of the things I got certified in, was through a yoga organization that's designed just for educators. I kind of got certified in SEL and incorporating those movements. Mindful movements is what I am doing. You're welcome, Amy. Marilyn, the symptoms that we put on there, we talked about there's no guarantee that that's what it is. But when you see the fear, the nervousness, and when you're watching the child consistently, and they're telling you about a pain, every day they have a stomach ache. That's one of the things. Every day they have a headache, especially. Stuff like that. That's based on the research. Watch for pain, listen for pain, listen for persistent pain. Listen for, that whole just there's a lot. No, there's a lot, but the symptoms I can run back through it and let you see there are just a wide variety, right? Just being fearful. So there's a wide variety of symptoms that I can go back and share. I don't know the answer about the natural sugars. That would be a good one to check with the primary care doctor on. Do they experience those same ones or those same symptoms? The question is, do natural sugars have that same impact as all the refined stuff? I don't know the answer, but I would like to know it. But my guess is that that's our only option, because of course we're not going to go to the, chemical stuff. But I don't want to be the one to recommend it. But it's definitely a question for the doctor. Okay, Rosie talked about sugars. Consistency. Thank you all for your participation. The discussion was rich. I hope you got something out of it. I'll move it. Wait. Yeah, I think I got through all the chat. Amy, they're offering yoga. Oh,
Yes, we're new to SRB, and I was thrilled when a yoga mat was on his school supply list, and my son loves it, so thrilled.
nice. What grade is your son in?
First.
And he's taking, how often do they do it?
It's once a week, and then gym is 3 days a week, which he needs. He's bigger, and we're going through a lot at home, so that movement, I'm so grateful for 4 days a week of movement.
Awesome. Just awesome. Thanks for sharing that. That's such good news that they're able to get out. And that's what kind of gets us through this, I believe, is the physical exercise. I want to tell you that I appreciate you. Manila, thank you. Are you here? I appreciate you having me. I will share with you anyone who I would love to connect with you if you.
You're welcome, Dr. Anderson. Yeah. I'm here.
If you are on LinkedIn,
Yes.
connect with me. That's my website.
Mhm.
And if you want to just chat or let me know some good news, feel free to email me. Just let me know. I was in the session that you did. I will share with Marilyn and there's a series of 5 things that I do strictly for mental health. Some for the adults, for teachers, some for, and this one happened to be, this was the one that was selected for children. Taking a look first at what can we do for them. But in order to serve them, we have to, what's the saying? If our cup is empty, we can't help them. So I do offer some things for adults, and I will share that as well.
Can you hear me?
I can.
I'm surprised. I was having some technical difficulties here, and I didn't think you would be able to hear me. But there may be someone who wants to ask you something, but not in front of the group.
Okay, would you like to do email, or would you like to, I can close this meeting and we can stay on Zoom? How would you like, if there's some, we can do email. You can call, you can have them call me. My phone is right here. I'll be sitting here.
No, because sometimes we have a question and it's somewhat personal and we don't want to ask something so that everyone else is hearing.
So let me tell you about Zoom too. You see where in the chat, are you looking at the chat?
Yes.
It doesn't have to go to everyone. You can click on where it says Rosie to everyone. You can click on maybe.
Direct.
You can say you only want to, there you go. Before you type your message, that you see everyone in blue, you can click on, I'm asking you all that because I want to make sure yours looks like mine. Mine is, this is everyone. If you click there, you should be able to see just my name.
Well, I was asking, just in case there's a parent who had an issue that they may not want to verbalize to everyone, that maybe it's just a one-on-one question. I wanted to make sure that they knew that they were able to do that.
Absolutely. Email right there, stretchyourschool@gmail.com is on the screen. And I have no problem with someone calling me. We can continue the discussion tonight. Tomorrow, I'll be around. We can continue the discussion, no problem.
I just wanted to make sure that they were aware that they did have an opportunity to ask, for lack of a better word, personal questions.
I understand. I do. And yes, I would, if I can answer it, I would love to have the discussion. And if I don't have the answer, I certainly would like to be the listening ear, for us to have a dialogue. Sometimes it helps just to say that to someone who's into this. I am deep into this as from a personal and research standpoint. Paying
You know,
attention.
because I met a young lady who has a son extremely bright,
Mhm.
extremely quiet, and he gets picked on a lot, but no one knew that he was being bullied
In school or at home?
Yeah. in school. He's an only child, so there's no one messing with him at home, but he was found out that he was being bullied in school.
No, what I'm asking is, had he not told any adults? Is that what we're saying? At
He
home?
had not said anything to anybody.
So, it's just and I won't say just because it's not small, because sometimes they're afraid. They're literally afraid, and especially an only. I have an only. They're afraid to say something because, they're judged for not being willing to or not being able to, and I am very grateful that our society has gotten into the anti-bullying thing, because some of you may agree, there was a time when people would literally say things like, oh, they're just being children. Oh, let a kid be a kid. Oh, let them take up, don't coddle them. Let them, they have it tough and all this kind of stuff. So it's actually, I feel really good about we're saving our children from mental health issues later now, because we're hitting this head on, and anti-bullying and bullying is a real thing. And I don't think we've always known that. It's not just kids playing with kids. It's such a
And so
blessing.
if I've got a child in class who's extremely quiet, are there things that I need to do?
I think it's the
Conversations I need to have?
I think it's the comfort level, and you all can chime in. But I think, in my experience as a teacher, all they need is an adult they can trust. So they're watching everything we do as a teacher. How does he or she respond to that?
You know what, Marilyn, I would be concerned if later on in the school year, the child was still being super quiet, because I had a student in the beginning, a kindergarten student, who was super quiet. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to participate. But after some weeks, he warmed up. So I would be concerned, if the child continued to, this is how many months of school now?
That's what I'm saying. We're into not quite the home stretch, but we're more than halfway through the school year.
And then there's that parent-teacher communication piece too. If that communication is there, it's, just asking the question, how can I serve? And early on, I'm glad you mentioned that, very early, how can I serve? I noticed that, your child doesn't really interact very much. Can you give me some recommendations? On how what can I, from a teacher standpoint, can you recommend something? And you may be able to, pick up something from the parent or, so that's, the question is, can you help me? Can you give me some recommendations? Does that make sense? Is that a good question?
Because sometimes I think those, they're bright, they're doing everything that a teacher would want a child to do. In fact, sometimes they're your model student, so.
Mhm. And you know what? They get ignored. Because of that, they're not giving us trouble as teachers. So they get, and maybe now that you're saying that happens at an early age, and I think back to my high school teaching years, maybe that's what happened over the years. They weren't getting attention because they weren't acting out. So in their minds, if I'm not a problem and I'm sitting here being good, then, they're taking that as, I'm being ignored. And then, I really am proud when I talk to teachers who pay attention to what's going on at recess. They're not just supervising, they're watching that. Who's playing with who, who's not playing with anybody, or who's standing over here pretending to play with someone and they're ignoring them. So that's such a great feeling when you see the teacher paying attention to just that at recess in young children, right? What's going on? How is a child socializing? Because recess can be kind of a break. It should be. We're outside. It's kind of a break from the classroom, but at the same time, sometimes some teachers, have told me that they. No, I learned more about the kids at recess than I ever do. I pay attention. She was kind of being comical about it. She said, I'm all in their business. But she said, I actually learn more about the child because they're not restricted in, under the rules of, the classroom environment. That's where I get to know my children is at recess.
And I
Dr.
guess, go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm Katie Tenzillo. I'm the principal at St. Robert Bellarmine, and I just wanted to thank you for being with us tonight. I just want to be conscious of time because I did tell our parents it would be about an hour. So
I thank you as well for having me. And as I said, if there's anyone who wants to follow up, feel free. Okay.
great. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Take care and have a good rest of your week.
You too.
Thank you. Good night.
Stay blessed.